At the very edge of Bucharest, hidden behind the industrial dust of the Giulești-Sârbi district, lies a colossal stone skeleton that seems to repel the very sky above it. This is a place where history and silence are fused into the heavy brickwork. It is a cathedral where a service has never been held, where the echoes of the past remain trapped in the walls, and where the air feels several degrees colder than the city just miles away. For centuries, locals have whispered that the ground here carries a heavy weight, marked by a long string of unexplained tragedies that defy logic. This massive monument stands as a witness to events that led to its permanent abandonment before it could ever be finished. Today, we explore the shadows of this silent giant and the reasons why it remains one of the most avoided locations in the region. Let's go deep into the well. The story begins in the late 18th century, an era of opulence and constant conflict between the great empires of the East. Prince Alexandru Ipsilanti envisioned a cathedral so grand it would rival the greatest churches of Europe, serving as a beacon of faith for the Wallachian capital. The master builders used a specific technique of layering brick and stone, creating walls nearly 2 meters thick, designed to withstand both time and tremors. Yet its sheer architectural strength became its ultimate downfall. Before the interior frescoes could be painted or the altar consecrated by the Metropolitan, the Russo-Turkish War reached the gates of Bucharest. The Ottoman army, observing the massive structure on the horizon from their positions across the marshes, didn't see a house of prayer. In their eyes, it was a strategic fortress, a secret military stronghold meant to guard the city's northern flank. Without hesitation, they turned their heavy siege cannons toward the site. The bombardment was relentless, and while it failed to bring the massive walls down, it shattered the monastery's spiritual purpose forever. The monks fled into the surrounding wetlands, the holy vestments were incinerated, and the great church was left as a hollow shell, never once hearing the sound of a formal prayer. Every haunted location has a center of gravity, and for Chiajna, it is the legend of the sunken bell. As Ottoman troops swept through the area, the terrified locals and the few remaining acolytes realized they could not protect the church's most valuable asset, a massive bronze bell cast with rare metals. In a desperate act of preservation, they lowered the bell from its temporary wooden frame and dragged it through the thick, black mud of the riverbank. They cast it into the silt-heavy waters of the Dâmbovița River, marking the spot with the hope of retrieval when peace returned. But peace never found its way back to Chiajna. The river, notorious for its shifting currents and deep mud, claimed the bell as its own. Over decades, the heavy bronze sank deeper into the muck until it was completely swallowed. Today, those who live in the nearby settlements avoid the riverbank during heavy storms. They claim that when the wind hits the ruins at a specific angle, a deep, metallic vibration rises from the water, a phantom tolling for a church that remains voiceless. In local folklore, a church without a bell is a body without a heart, an empty vessel that invites wandering spirits because no holy vibration exists to drive them away. In the early 1800s, Bucharest was struck by one of the most terrifying events in its history, Caraja's plague. The city became a landscape of fear, with wooden carts constantly roaming the streets to collect the dead. The authorities were desperate for a place to isolate the infected far from the city center. The abandoned, thick-walled ruins of Chiajna offered the perfect solution: natural isolation and a structure that was easy to guard. It was turned into a lazaretto, but in reality, it was a place not for healing, but for dying in total solitude. Hundreds of plague victims were transported here in the dead of night, their cries for water and mercy echoing against the cold, unyielding bricks. There was only the long, agonizing wait for the end. The thick walls, meant to protect worshippers, now served as a prison for the dying, trapping the stench of disease and the final breaths of the forgotten within their massive embrace. The tragedy of the plague years left a permanent mark on the very earth surrounding the ruins. Historical records and local oral traditions confirm that many of the plague victims were not given individual burials. They were cast into mass graves dug directly under the church floor or in the immediate perimeter of the yard. Because these individuals died in quarantine, many passed away without the last rites, and their remains were never moved to consecrated ground. This layer of unresolved suffering is what many believe creates the oppressive weight felt by anyone who steps inside the nave today. Visitors often describe a sensation of being watched by thousands of eyes or feeling a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature. The ground itself seems to hold the memory of that trauma, making the air feel stagnant and heavy, as if the earth is still mourning the souls it was forced to consume so violently. For over a century, the ruins sat in relative silence, reclaimed by aggressive weeds and thick ivy that obscured the scars of the cannons. In the 1960s, during the height of the communist regime's urban expansion, Chiajna became the backdrop for a very different kind of nightmare. The area had become extremely isolated, a no-man's land on the edge of the sprawling capital where the police rarely ventured. This isolation made the ruins a magnet for the city's criminal underworld. It became a site where high-profile disappearances and brutal crimes were hidden from the eyes of the state. Criminals actively encouraged the cursed reputation of the monastery, using the local fear of ghosts as a biological shield to keep the curious at a distance. They knew that local residents were far too terrified of ancient entities to investigate any screams or strange lights coming from the ruins at night. When several bodies were eventually discovered within the structure during this decade, it cemented the idea in the public consciousness that Chiajna was a place where life simply came to an end, whether by the plagues of the past or the human cruelty of the present. The paranormal reputation of Chiajna has transitioned from old wives' tales into the digital age, supported by modern explorers and urban hunters. These visitors have documented phenomena that challenge simple rationalization. The most frequent and consistent report is of the tall shadow, a silhouette that appears on the walls of the altar even when no one is standing nearby and no external light source is present. Unlike a normal shadow produced by the sun or a flashlight, this figure is described as having a fluid, unnatural grace, moving independently of the observers. Beyond the visual anomalies, the ruins are a goldmine for those capturing audio evidence of the unexplained. Investigators using sensitive recording equipment have captured what is known as electronic voice phenomena, sounds that resemble rhythmic chanting, whispered prayers in archaic dialects, or heavy, labored breathing in rooms that are completely empty. These sounds aren't heard by the naked ear but appear clearly upon playback, often responding directly to questions asked by the investigators. Some theorize that the massive brick walls and the proximity to the river create a natural recording medium, capturing acoustic imprints of the past. Others suggest a more spiritual explanation, that the spirits of the plague victims and the monks who were never able to finish their prayers are still attempting to complete their rituals. The acoustics of the roofless ruins seem to distort the wind, turning the simple movement of air into something that sounds terrifyingly human, keeping the legend of the haunting alive for every new generation of explorers. There have been multiple, serious attempts by the Romanian Orthodox Church and various heritage groups to reclaim and restore Chiajna to its intended glory. From an architectural standpoint, the ruin is a masterpiece of the late Balkan style, and its survival through centuries of war and massive earthquakes is a miracle of 18th-century engineering. Every single restoration project has met a strange and abrupt end. Construction workers have walked off the site, reporting the sensation of being pushed by invisible hands while working on high scaffolding. Project leaders and architects have faced sudden, inexplicable legal hurdles, financial disasters, or personal tragedies just as the work was scheduled to begin. In the local Giulești community, it is firmly believed that the ground itself is unholy and actively rejects any attempt at sanctification. To this day, despite the city's expansion and several modern plans to convert the site into a museum or an active monastery, it remains a roofless skeleton, exposed to the elements. It stands as if the earth is determined to reclaim the bricks one by one, refusing to let any man-made structure thrive on that specific patch of land. If we look past the ghosts, the sunken bells, and the ancient curses, the real tragedy of Chiajna is a story of unfortunate geography and brutal geopolitics. The monastery was built at the exact wrong time in the exact wrong place, a border zone between three competing empires that used the Romanian principalities as their private battlefield. The ruins of this sanctuary stand as a striking contrast to the modern world around them. While the historic walls remain open to the elements, a small, active church has recently been built nearby, bringing life and quiet prayers back to the area after centuries of isolation. This mix of living faith and dark folklore makes the location unique. Whether you believe in the phantom tolling of a sunken bell or the moving shadows on the altar, You cannot deny the cold shiver that takes hold when you stand in the center of that roofless nave. Don't forget. I'll see you at the bottom of the well.